Thanks very much. Okay, so this session is all for you guys to learn about what kids are into, how can you connect with kids with your marketing, what platforms you should use, etc., etc. Any questions, come and speak to me afterwards. This is a research presentation, so I have to kick off with a little bit of methodology. This is all. Basically, we ran this study across the Asia-Pacific region. So Australia, we did 1,000 kids, so 1,000 kids and their parents. We ran that across the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, and we also ran the study in New Zealand. It was an online study, and as I said, it was around 50 minutes, but that was split 50% between the kid and the parent. So what we were interested in looking at, and this is around the 12th edition of the study that we've done, is what, as I said, what trends are we seeing in the kids space? What are kids up to? What are they interested in their media consumption? And what are the things that shape what they do? And the areas that we were focusing on were their world, the things that are changing around them all the time. You know, as kids develop, and we really recognize this in this study, we were looking at how kids develop as they get older and how that impacts their consumption of media and the things that they do. The content, the stuff that they're engaging with, and the stories that they are able to engage with, so sort of their cognitive development and how that impacts the stuff that they're consuming. And then finally, their media activities. That's changed massively. I mean, from the time I was a kid, I'd come home from school and there was a block of TV on 3 or 4 hours of kids' TV. That was it for the night on one kids' TV station. Clearly, I was a little bit before the cable era. We've got 24-hour kids stations. Kids have got lots of access to online content. We saw Don earlier talking about YouTube. So how has all of that affected the way that they consume media? Well, we'll start off by looking at the media consumption. There's a lot of hyperbole about how TV is dead, it's a dying medium. So we really wanted to dive into that in more detail. So we ran some interviews in Australia and the Philippines to get some vox pop, some natural reaction from kids and their parents. And this is the first one, hopefully it's going to come through, about kids and their TV consumption.
Yes. 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 2 hours.
About 2 hours before he goes to school and before I go to work.
After dinner, we usually watch TV together.
Adventure time. Yes, adventure time. Gumball. Gumball. Ben 10. Gumball. Powerpuff Girls. We Bear Bears. Phineas and Ferb. Adventure Time. Mighty Magic Swords. Toonami, Dragon Ball Z. I like Cartoon Network. You gotta be kidding me. When they like apples and pies, they say, and I say apple, you say pie. Apple pie, apple pie.
So this came through in the results that we saw, that this is kind of the monthly reach of all the different media that we were looking at, and TV is still the #1 media. Now, we're not burying our heads in the sand and saying that online doesn't exist. That's seen massive growth, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But TV still remains as the #1 media. And if you think of lots of the franchises that are developing, both for kids and adults, a lot of them start with TV. So you think of Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead. These are TV shows that when I'm looking at the general entertainment channels that we run, they kick our asses in the ratings. But they started off as TV properties, then they move online and people do the piracy, all of that type of stuff that goes with it. And they're actually more famous for being the more pirated shows and watched on TV. Now, what are the families doing in front of the TV screen? Well, that's changed a lot. As I said, when I was a kid, a long time ago, there was just the box, and there's a bit of news, a bit of kids programming, and that's all it was used for. You can see the types of things that people are doing now. A lot of this data I'm showing is from Australia. It's fairly common around the region. Where there's any significant differences, I'll show that to you. Obviously, with smart TV, we're starting to see more online type of activities. Kids are plugging in their PlayStations, their Xboxes. I've seen some results recently about looking at ad effectiveness, and that type of area, smart TV, particularly actually in Greater China, is really growing massively. But you can see here in Australia, kids are consuming 2.5 hours of TV per day. That changes quite considerably in Southeast Asia. These are the only markets I've got access to. Kind of frightening. It's about 6 hours a day that kids are watching TV in the Philippines, which is why they were able to name all of their TV stations that they're viewing. So what do families like to watch together? How can you connect with kids and the parents at the same time? Really consistent, year after year, it's always been cartoons and movies, the things that the family likes to do together. Movies, you tend to see that there's a bit more supervision, because it varies a little bit by market, but parents can get a little bit tired of Ben 10, of SpongeBob, so they sometimes leave the kids to that, whereas movies is a little bit more like family time. So you're starting to see the time around the TV set, the traditional TV set, as family time, and lots of co-viewing to be able to reach out to the family as a whole. The types of digital devices in the household, and there is a little bit of a difference here between the more developed countries of Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Southeast Asia. So here what we've seen is that as penetration of tablets has increased, parents are more likely to give that to their kids to use. So that's sort of the family internet device to be used. In Southeast Asia, where penetration's a little bit lower, the parents are still giving mobile phones to their kids to use. In Australia, this was the picture about 3 or 4 years ago, but as things have evolved, as technologies become more ubiquitous in the household, the mobile phone has moved away in Australia from being accessible to the kids until they get a bit older and they have their own. So what devices are they using per day? This is a little bit misleading. Actually, this is a traditional shape of the day TV curve. So it's a little bit high before school, then it dips down through the school hours, then comes up in evening prime, and then tails off. During school time, during recess, here it's tablets. In Southeast Asia, it tends to be mobile phones. The actual usage is tiny, so I wouldn't suggest that using mobiles and tablets is a great way to target kids during the daytime if that's what you want to do, because the usage is really, really, really small. What we've seen consistently is, TV when kids get home, whether that's cartoons or movies with their parents. And then right at the end of the day, this has been really consistent in all of the markets. Kids are starting to use, or kids are using, tablets for that just pre-sleep time game or last catch-up of a bit of YouTube or whatever it is. So there's really consistently that very last thing that they're doing before they turn the lights out and go to sleep is a little bit of playing games or watching videos on a tablet in bed. So what types of apps and internet content are they consuming? Well, we looked initially at the apps that they were downloading to devices, and this is actually what we were asking of parents. So we can see that, people are starting to get into this idea of having free and paid apps. So across Australia and Southeast Asia, parents are starting to recognize that it's worth paying for quality content. In Australia, the decision is very much price-driven. I guess for any Asian parents here, you'll understand this. Across Asia, education is the massive driver for that. So when they're making decisions of what they're going to pay for, education is the primary driver. The types of apps that kids are consuming, this really reflects the main habits of kids. So they're into video, so YouTube, in the English language markets, in Philippines and Australia particularly, we started to get some recognition of YouTube Kids. There's gaming. Minecraft is huge. For those of you that aren't parents, it surprised me. Minecraft is absolutely massive across both boys and girls. And then, lastly, social media. We'll get into social media in a little bit of detail. It would surprise you, but it's increasingly prominent in kids' lives, whether they have access through their parents' account or through their own. So I talked a little bit about online video being more and more prevalent. This is the shift that we've seen, the online activities. And you can see the biggest growth here is in watching or posting online videos. I've got the numbers for posting videos. It's actually kind of small, which is right for kids. You don't want kids posting too much content. In terms of the stuff that they say that they're watching, a lot of it's funny videos, music videos. Music videos is actually a little bit troubling. When we do focus groups, we talk to parents about this. They're quite worried about the profanity, about the sexualized content that kids can be exposed to. Funny videos, you know, fails, gym fails, cats on skateboards, that type of stuff, constantly popular. What's really interesting here for Australia is, particularly amongst this sort of preschool age group, it's a very tight audience, but they're really into toy-branded webisodes. So again, there's an opportunity there for those preschoolers to target them and think of some partnerships there. When it comes to posting content themselves, we saw Don earlier was talking about the kids and some kids that have made their own channels. The types of things that they're posting, we've got here making random videos, pets, things like that. In Australia, it's about 9%. In Southeast Asia, it's higher. It's about 17% of kids are saying that they post some content. Again, we got a video, this time from Australia, a girl, I think we got some other kids, talking about the types of content that they're making and sharing.
In class, we had to make we had to do a project for Bollywood, so I got in a group of 10 people and we made a Bollywood movie. To use an app called iMovie, yeah, and then we just shot them each scene one by one, and it was about like a love story between two kids.
We have a vlog. It's a food vlog. So we go to restaurants and try their food. We video some, we interview some chefs and like waitresses of like, if we don't know what food it is, we ask them. We learn a lot and yeah, it's just fun.
Okay, so kids are getting more savvy at this. The content creation for them, you know, using their own iPhones to make videos and edit videos is becoming second nature for them. A bit like the olders of us, you know, when we used to program the VCR, that was easy for us, but not for our parents. Kids themselves are starting to have favorite vloggers, so it's not just about content channels like Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. They're starting to connect with online personalities, vloggers. In Australia, Dan TDM was one. You can see Stampy, PewDiePie, Lady Shadow. The consistent fact with this is it's around gaming, and a lot of it's around instructional stuff. So kids are interested. I talked earlier about how Mindshare is super popular. They want to learn how to build stuff. So you see Dan TDM, Stampy, all of these guys are teaching kids how they can do stuff, fun adventures when they're out in Grand Theft Auto or any of these games. And kids really relate to that. Dan TDM is a real favorite. He speaks very clearly. He doesn't use profanity. So a lot of parents are very comfortable with their kids being exposed to that. What was interesting was there's a couple of female vloggers in Australia that came through. Not quite as popular as the males there, but similar sort of lifestyle, a little bit more lifestyle-y with the female vloggers. In New Zealand, it was all male vloggers. And this is how it pans out across Southeast Asia. So you've got, you know, some of these consistent sort of PewDiePie, Dan TDM still there, but you're starting to see some localization. So again, if you're thinking of coming up with a partnership, looking for endorsement, it's well worth speaking to some of the local vloggers that will have a connection to the local audience. The games that the kids are into, so Minecraft, as I said, super popular. This is actually interesting, the Minecraft phenomenon. A while ago, parents, as Shoko was saying, they worry about their kids using computers, and they saw Minecraft as very much just another game. There's been a bit of a shift in mindset amongst parents towards Minecraft, that it's kind of now seen as the modern day Lego. So Lego was great because it's very creative. It's a sandbox. Kids can just go off and build stuff. When they're not online, Minecraft is just the same. They can go off and, you know, just express themselves with their imagination, and parents are starting to relate to that and understand that and allow access to Minecraft a lot more than they used to. So you see the difference there in the boys and girls. This is for Australia. Across Southeast Asia, we actually did this study around October, November last year. So Australia was just before that. The Pokemon phenomenon had just sort of launched, and it was at its heyday at that time. So you see it's number 1, number 2 across the region. The types of games that kids are playing, and again, there's a difference, but there's similarities here. In Australia, it's about sandbox Minecraft type of stuff. Number 2 is puzzle games, 3 combat, and 4 power-up games. And then when we look at Southeast Asia, we got puzzle games. You see a similar-ish sort of pattern. Now, we use this study for our own, to understand kids and for our own content development. What we saw as an opportunity here is the puzzle games area. Now, we are never going to be able to create our own Minecraft or our own Call of Duty. We just don't have the money to invest in to make that. But there are opportunities around licensing our IP or creating our own puzzle games. The longevity of them is shorter. You know, you've got things like Crossy Road and stuff like that. Kids don't play it for a really long time, but when they do, it's very intense, and we can see that it's very popular. And the cost of development is way, way lower than these others. So there's a real opportunity, particularly amongst across Southeast Asia, to use puzzle games to build awareness of your IP. Now, on the social media side of things, you might think this isn't really relevant for kids, given the ages involved. You'd be wrong, or at least you would be for parts of the region. So in Australia, the types of social media that kids are using, I guess pretty obvious: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. And this is what it looks like when we break that out by age. So in Australia, as you'd imagine, everything under about 10 years old, very, very low usage. Then parents start to open up, let kids have the accounts from about the age of 10 with supervision. And then from 13 to 14 onwards, there's pretty good penetration. Now, this is what it looks like when I plot all of those countries that we did the study on. You can see there's a massive difference amongst the developed nations. We've got New Zealand, Singapore, Australia at the bottom with very high parental supervision. You know, pretty worried about their kids having access to social media. A little bit different in Singapore. But there's a massive difference amongst Indonesia and Philippines. So 30+ % of 4 to 6-year-olds in those countries having social media accounts or access to social media. Now, the difference with those markets are, you know, they're archipelagos, so it's difficult to get to other members of the family. They've got lots of family that are likely to be working overseas. So social media is used as a way to connect and stay in touch with the family, which is pretty different from Singapore. Obviously, you haven't got far to go to if you've got family here in Singapore. And then across Australia and New Zealand, parents are very, very protective in those markets, and they're more worried about people that they don't know or they don't like having contact with their kids and some of the implications that might have. There's been a few scandals in Australia around that, both of unwanted contact and also kids using social media to share inappropriate content amongst themselves. So parents in those markets are very, very careful about allowing kids their access to it. So how do parents control? What do parents feel comfortable with and less comfortable with? Well, this is really consistent Australia and across Southeast Asia. The ones that the medias that they're most concerned about are the social media sites and apps. And then on the least concerned is around kids' TV content, kids' channels, that type of stuff. Now, when I do focus groups and brand trackers of our content around the region, we get plenty of parents that don't like Adventure Time. Plenty of parents think that SpongeBob is a little bit rude. However, there's a limit to how inappropriate that's going to be. There aren't swear words. There's a little bit of violence. Someone might call someone an idiot, but it's very different to the types of things that kids might be exposed to on YouTube or Facebook. So whilst individual shows might have their issues with parents, as a media in its own right, these are the most safe environments for their kids. And how do parents actually supervise their media, the media usage? We can see how that moves across from age group, that supervision generally declines over age. I guess that's no big surprise. I think that line, yeah, TV still has quite high supervision, but that's a lot around this idea of TV being family time together, and parents are going to be in the room sharing the movie or sharing the cartoons with their kids, so they feel that there's supervision going on. In terms of the way that that supervision manifests itself, it moves from direct supervision to a trust-based arrangement. So by the time kids are 13 to 14, they're told that they're not allowed to go to porn sites, and, for instance, and parents trust that their kids aren't going to do that. I don't know how misguided that is. It changes actually. Around the 10 to 11, in my experience, the 10 to 11-year-olds are pretty good at self-supervision. When I've spoken to kids in Australia, we run focus groups. They know that stuff's naughty or it's not going to be right, it's going to be scary for them, so they won't go to those sites. When we did same focus groups in Mexico, we did, to give you an idea, group of boys around the age group, it just evolved into 8-year-old boys talking about their favorite porn sites. It's really scary. Very, very different between Latin America and Asia Pacific. Okay, moving to advertising. This is a really touchy area. Lots of FMCG companies, CPG companies are very worried about this. So what we wanted to dive into is really asking parents how they felt about advertising and what's right and what's wrong. So I've got a video clip here. I think it's mostly parents talking about their attitudes to it. This one's from the Philippines, I think.
We see in the commercials that the kids do enjoy the toys, and then at least we get to see how they use it. And we get to gauge if that will be good for him or not.
Sometimes it depends on the ad that they're showing. Sometimes you get a chance to know what's happening then. Kasi they would tell me na, oh mommy, I like this and this and it makes lahat. They would tell me na, I would like to have this.
I like the ones of Nestle or Chucky. The one that shows you the relationship of the mom and the kid. That one, and I think the recent one that I really like is the McDo Happy Meal commercial. It's a song, and then the kid is saying sorry that sometimes he messes up, but still his parents love him. Yeah, so it's a nice commercial. The quality of the commercial, it shows the importance of family and of being a parent and the relationship of the child and the parent.
So, done in the right way, parents are often fairly positive towards advertising. So, it can be introduced, as we heard from some of the parents there, introducing ideas. It can help them stay relevant in their kids' life, know what's culturally going on. When it comes to ads influence, this is something that we heard from parents. That parents see that ads on TV are the most influential. Online, you tending to see ads on YouTube are pretty positive, but beyond that, kids particularly, are pretty good at screening that out. And when we ask kids about it themselves, they feel that it's a more fun environment. They find it's funny. Ads are basically cutting through better on TV than online. What were the favorite ads when we did this? Number one in Australia was, I hope this doesn't play, it's a little bit strange, but it was actually an insurance company. It's a campaign called Captain Risky, and it was basically a comedic thing where you had this stuntman that was crashing into stuff, doing all sorts of stuff, crazy things, and the idea was, we don't insure Captain Risky, so your premiums are low. Kids loved the comedic element. They're not quite in the market for it. The second one was interesting because it never actually appeared on TV. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm not going to describe it. That gives you an idea. Kids are into that, pooping and that type of stuff. So it was an online phenomenon. It came in number 2. Across Southeast Asia, we saw a lot of food-related advertising. In the Philippines, you heard lots of the examples that they were talking about, McDonald's, Jollibee, Nestle. That really resonates. And it's done, they have regulations about the way that can be done. It's about that wholesome environment. It's not about the kids scoffing a Big Mac. Now, what is it about the ads that help kids relate to it. These are the key drivers. This is universal for ads, even amongst parents. The differences that we saw in the region was in the Philippines, it was all about the music. In Indonesia, it was all about comedy. It had to be funny. So when we're tailoring ads, if you're tailoring ads, think about that as a way to connect with the audience there. Okay, I'll rush through this because we're short on time. Biggest crazes, favorite toy brands, they're evergreens. We did actually see the Avengers and the Marvel franchise starting to come through for boys a little bit better this time. And the top celebrities, Taylor Swift, all this type of stuff. So just to wrap up, we broke this out into 3 different areas. I'm only going to talk about 2 here. We looked at physical development, social development, and cognitive development, and how that varies across age, and how that relates to creating meaningful messages for the kids. So it starts with physical development. You can read this yourself, but as kids get older, their dexterity improves. You might not think about this, but a young kid doesn't have the motor skills to accurately use a mobile phone and to be able to play with it. So it's more about broad swipes. So when we're developing content for the younger preschoolers and early schoolers, it has to be tablets because that's how they're able to manipulate. When they're getting a little bit older, they move into devices. Tablets, this is just the number 1. Tablets and phones are still behind that. And when they're older, it's about having the mobile phone. They can use that. You know, in their life, they've developed those skills. They're able to, you know, get really good at playing instruments, that type of stuff. They know where they are with that type of stuff. They've got the dexterity, basically. In terms of apps, when they're very young, it's about YouTube is consistently, it's going to be number 2 or 3 in all of these age ranges. But for the very young, it's about watching video clips, you know, funny type of stuff. That changes a little bit by market based on their ability to read. So where there's a Chinese market, it's a little bit more difficult, so it takes them longer to be able to recognize characters. Similarly in Thai, but in English, kids are able to navigate a little bit more easily. As they get older, it's more around gaming, and then finally amongst the teenagers, it's all about social media. And then on the cognitive development side of things, their ability to understand storylines changes dramatically as they get older. So give you an example of some cartoons that we test. When we showed the younger kids, they just recognize a series of humorous elements within a cartoon. Just something funny happened here. A pot fell off a shelf and hit someone on the head. That was funny to them. As they get older, they're able to understand the storyline. They're able to really develop their understanding of the characters within a story and to want to create stories of their own. How does that relate to celebrities? Well, amongst the really young ones, it's all about cartoons and that sort of aspirational princess or superhero. As they get older, they're starting to relate to people that can help them. So Dan TDM comes in here. We also saw Katy Perry registered amongst the girls for celebrities. So there's more of a mix amongst the 8 to 11-year-olds of cartoons and real people. And then by the time that they're 12 to 14, it's actual personalities. They want to be able to pick a hero, relate to that, and aspire to be like that person. That is it. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, a question for you, David. Now, how can marketers work with this set of data and trends within their marketing strategies in a way that's compliant with the existing regulations in the kids space? What are some of the things to look up for when implementing these trends?
Well, I think it's now a case of not thinking of kids as just a whole group of people that are aged somewhere south of 12 years old. It's actually segmenting them, thinking of them in different age groups, understanding how they develop and the way that they understand and can relate to whatever you're trying to talk about, and creating content around that. Batman's a really good example of a franchise that does that, where they've got very simplistic and very kiddish type of stuff for the preschoolers, all the way up to The Dark Knight for teenagers, so real motion pictures. So kids can stay a fan of Batman from the age of 4 right the way up into their teens, their 20s, their 30s. So it's just thinking about developing the franchise and targeting based on the kid's age.
Okay, and I have one last question then. You talk a lot about Australia, and you do touch a bit on Southeast Asia as well. So just to add on to that question earlier, are there any key trends or differences in terms of the type of apps or content that kids like in the different countries here in Southeast Asia?
I think in some ways Southeast Asian, particularly in Indonesia and the Philippines, they're a little bit more sophisticated than kids in Australia. Because they've been exposed to social media at a younger age, they've got exposure to different things. So give you another example, where we were testing some, for one of our franchises, we were testing some sort of apps and things that kids could play around with, something called a monsterizer. So it's basically a Snapchat filter. So you could take your photo and it would turn you into a monster. Kids in Southeast Asia, they've seen Snapchat, they've seen all this stuff, so to them it was like, whatever. In Australia, they'd had no idea what Snapchat was, so they thought it was the best thing that they'd ever seen. So again, you have to think about what have kids been exposed to here, and then tailor it according to them.
Excellent. No questions, and then we shall close here. Thank you very much, David. Please give a round of applause to David.
Thanks a lot.